Mm-hmm.
Good to have you back, Joe.
Yeah, where was I last week? I don't know. I was missing. AWOL. I was AWOL.
You know what happened? Peace broke out.
It did?
And the world became a better place.
Excellent. So there's nothing... It's all good?
It's all good. We're just here to celebrate the fact.
Have a party?
No, I'm bullshitting. The world's still going to hell in a handbasket.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it even in a handbasket?
By 1,000 cuts. You know, death by 1,000 cuts.
It's more like...
It's horrible to watch this.
It's going to hell in a handbasket. Is that like floating down a river in a handbasket?
Yeah, a river of sewage.
A river of sewage. And it's not even a handbasket. It's probably like a...
No, it's probably made in China plastic.
Made of paper.
Worse,
it's a,
yeah.
It's a paper...
Plastic, at least. You stand a chance.
Paper boat. Yeah, so what were you talking about last week? I was always occupied, so...
Roe versus Wade.
The whole... Were you here for 2.5 hours?
No, that was the breaking news. That was the current thing.
Yeah. The thing that everybody had to get worked up about. And
I found it interesting in the end, you know. It's almost 50 years to the year. It does kind of close a weird... It brackets a weird episode in itself. Obviously, the U.S. is complex and many things come together. It kind of gave it back when I started to read about how it came about, why that decision was made in the first place. I realized no wonder the U.S. has been so polarized on this issue, or rather, it became polarized to the point of you're one or the other. Well, that's what you're encouraged to be.
Right.
That's not really true. Most Americans actually consistently poll in the
middle ground,
in a rational middle ground,
which isn't hard to
which
do.
is reflected in their state's laws.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was weird. It was weird because of the way the Supreme Court made a decision that affected all states and made them adapt their laws to make it much more liberal than Europe's, for example, abortion rights. And you know, there's been a 50-year debate then about should the Supreme Court effectively enact social policy? Do they get to write laws? Well, there's a strong argument, left and right. No, they shouldn't. It's supposed to adjudicate just based on precedent, state what is or is not permissible based on laws or what Congress or the executive work on. It's not supposed to. And it really did enact law in 1973. Anyway, so lifting it was really just... with all other things being equal, it would have stabilized. But it should have calmed down. It should not have actually blown up. You know, increased polarization in the United States. That decision in 1973 did that. But this returned the U.S. to more reasonable... It's the complete opposite, actually, of what Biden said. Biden, you know, shook his head and said, "Oh, it's terrible. This now makes the U.S. an outlier among developed nations." Presumably meant the West. Not at all. This actually brings the U.S. more into line with Europe.
Yeah, but that's not the way it's presented.
No, it's presented
totally
differently. Anyway, last...
It doesn't make any sense to me, and it's just something it's the latest thing that you're meant to be annoyed about, right? Or meant to be worked up about. And there were some people got a bit worked up, and that gets a lot of press, but I don't think anywhere near even a significant percentage of the American population actually did anything about it. There was
and the fears about riots everywhere, there were, you know, protests in a lot of places, but they were typically
small
East Coast cities, you know, and it never went beyond
just a bit of shouting.
What the media was saying might happen, i.e., were possibly subtly encouraging to happen, never happened.
Yeah.
So it in a sense, it should really have just been a mundane administrative correction.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what, states, you decide.
I saw an interesting image. I don't have it here, but don't really need it. It was for an event to protest for women's rights.
I saw it, yeah.
Roe versus Wade, and it said that, but it was called "My Body, My Choice."
Yes.
And then underneath it said that you had to have you'd be fact checked.
Yeah, I tried to find the source. I couldn't. It might have been the real poster sort of notification about an actual protest. Yeah. I don't think it was any kind of official source, but
yeah. But that's what's going on. Like, well, I mean, it's true anyway. How do people reconcile those two things? They don't. Like, so there's not a lot of thinking going on, or not a lot of kind of sober reflection and calm consideration of the actual situation. It's just not everybody again. They try to give you the impression that this is something that everybody's worked up about, but in reality they're not, right? Most people are not worked up about this, and most people are not worked up about Ukraine, and most people are not worked up about. The only thing a lot of people, and again, it's not most people, but the only thing that people were worked up about was a significant percentage of the population were worked up about COVID and lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, you know. But these kind of issues that don't really impact people en masse yet, anyway, in terms of Ukraine. But Ukraine and Roe versus Wade and stuff, it doesn't impact people, large numbers of people directly themselves. They're just opinions, really. You know what I mean? Obviously, other than the people in Ukraine when it comes to the invasion of Ukraine. So the idea that there's a lot of people who are that feel so strongly about these issues that they're willing to take time out and put energy into going out and protesting and making placards and stuff. It's not. They're not the things that people are protesting about. There are people protesting and you know that are representative of probably of an opinion in the general population, and there's a significant number of people protesting, but it's got nothing to do with the issues that they tell you that you should be protesting about. I mean, like, there's protests in Holland right now about Dutch farmers are protesting about the Dutch government enacting kind of laws that require them to reduce their nitrogen consumption in order to save the planet. And farmers in Holland are kind of spraying using tractors and muck spreaders to dump manure and stuff at government offices and that kind of stuff. It's interesting. That's the kind of thing that gets people out in the streets, and it's just, you know, it's one section of the population that are directly impacted. But when it comes to farmers, it's an indication of where things might go, and that will ultimately affect other people, or maybe is even affecting other people in different ways, like the, you know, government policies in terms of food supply and the greening of the economy and all that kind of stuff. But
it's a crazy law. It's and the Dutch government admitted in statements about it that, you know, this is going to shut down Dutch farms. Right. Sorry, but saving the planet. And the reaction then is strong, but it also has a lot of popular support. It will, because people know they don't need to be informed about the issues left and right to know this definitely affects me.
And they know that
in the supermarket, like tomorrow.
And they know that farmers have, generally speaking, when farmers get in the street, they have legitimate grievances. They're not just spitballing, like, you know.
No. The other interesting overall effect of, I thought, the fact that a court was making a decision that basically rectified a wrong, an administrative wrong, was that in these times, despite all the craziness that's going on, when it comes down to it and the rubber hits the road, it's still the legal realities in courts still tend to match objective reality,
right?
As opposed to the trials by media, like this thing that's going on with January 6th still, you know, totally cooked, one-sided trial. It's made to look legalistic, but it ain't. If it was a real procedure, even by congressional standards, where the GOP could respond and so on, it would never be going the way it is.
What year is this? This is, what is this? 2022, right? What happens in 2022 in America?
It's halfway point, so there's midterm elections for a
later,
third of governorship
later
plus
this year, so it's a big
Senate seats.
And so, is it reasonable to assume that the Dems would have, you know, thrown up this kind of show trial effectively, without the accused actually being there, so they can talk shit about him and make stuff up, in an effort to remind everybody why it's a really bad idea to vote Republican, because by voting Republican, you're voting Trump. And who wants? Do you want another insurrection? I mean, they...
It's amazing, isn't it, how he still dominates the news cycle, despite him being basically sin-binned. He has no platform, and yet he dominates
they're
the
afraid
American
of, They're
news
afraid
cycle.
of him, yeah. They're obviously seriously afraid of him. I mean, they're terrified of him for the 4 years that he was in the White House. Just put up. This is like part of the hearing, right? And I think that's Liz Cheney. Is it Liz Cheney? Yeah, Liz Cheney. What a wonderful father she has, in the form of Dick Cheney.
She's in office herself.
Psychopath. Yeah, she's a congresswoman. She's in Congress, I think.
Who's voting for her?
I don't know. Yeah, bizarre. I don't understand because she's not exactly a Republican. So, but then that was her father, really, who's a neocon, which isn't really a Republican. Anyway, this is a segment from these stupid hearings that are, still on. We're still ongoing as of a couple of days ago. Or well, maybe last week. I don't know if they ended or not, but this is a testimony. Just this is a little bit of testimony, and I'll give you an idea. It'll give you an idea of the kind of stuff they're talking about. Go ahead.
Relayed to him, we don't have the assets to do it. It's not secure. We're going back to the West Wing. The president had a very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
His clavicles. I've seen the memes about this.
Yeah.
Where Trump's racing around on
in the beast. Yeah. So I mean, this is obviously she's Cassidy Hutchinson. She's a former aide to White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and she's recounting second or maybe third hand information about supposedly what happened on that day. So this is after Trump's rally, and then people have gone up to the Capitol, and Trump is in the presidential limo, and he wants to go to, according to her, take me to the Capitol. This is fucking MAGA country. Take me to the Capitol right now.
I'm the fucking president.
I'm the fucking president. Take me. And lunged at the steering wheel, grabbed the steering wheel, tried to grab the guy's throat, all this kind of stuff. And this is from the back of the beast. I don't know if the limo that he drives in.
Yeah, it's like half a mile long.
Yeah. So, I mean, none of it, it's just, I think this testimony was actually, contradicted by, in the past couple of days, by other people who said, no, that didn't happen. But here she is testifying in front of this committee that Trump went kind of nuts and tried to grab the steering wheel because he wanted to go to the Capitol to take part in the insurrection to overthrow America and usher in a dictatorship, right?
A theocracy.
A theocracy, yeah. So, yeah. But, in the somber faces and the, very seriously telling how horrible, I don't know,
I guess it's meant to warn off American voters this coming midterms from voting anyone
right
who is Republican on the Trump side, right? But here's a headline: Guardian International Edition, also news cycle dominated by Trump in Britain. Whenever they talk about the U.S. Headline: Pro-Trump Republicans primary wins. Pro-Trump Republicans primary wins raise alarm about U.S. democracy. So, crucial races from Nevada to South Carolina return candidates who back, quote, big lie of stolen election, end quote, while Democrats lost Hispanic votes in South Texas. It's not working. They're hoping, they're living on a hope and prayer that, they're going to stay
right.
off.
You can't just make it go away, basically.
No.
What people saw over the 4 years of the Trump presidency and what they, deduced, let's say, from what they saw, you can't just wipe that out. You can't make that go away. So the best thing they can do is just try and distract people. Just try to, bring up anything and everything to distract the population and set them against each other. It's sad. The whole thing's sad.
The Trump, they're calling it that. The Trump faction is going to win bigly, unless of course there's a lot of we can't say that because it doesn't happen in a beautiful democracy like America. All things being equal, they should win. They should clear the board this November.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. If you just go to the CNN homepage, like Trump is all over it too. Obviously, in relation to the January 6th hearing. Headline on CNN homepage right now: Trump's decision on when to announce the 2024 run has become even more pressing. And then they have speculative opinion pieces below that, a list of 3 about when he might do it, what they should do to prepare for it, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So the man hasn't said anything, right? But they're assuming he is gonna, number one. And number 2, they're like strategizing already. Well, obviously, January 6th show trial is part of that strategizing, but also in a formal capacity about how to stave it off. When's he going to say? Do you see what I'm getting at? This the obsession with this guy. Like, it's just, it speaks volumes, let's say, about, whatever happened in November 2020. And also then about the atrocious formal, official poll ratings of Biden in the last 2 years. They know this is completely unpopular.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. It's people need to think about that. Think about why the media is so, and really think about it. And not just go with your kind of like what you've been told, but really think about why the media, over the course of his, not just the media obviously, but the Washington establishment, over the course of his administration, why they repeatedly, consistently attacked him and tried to undermine him and tried to, hobble his entire administration. And then since then, any prospect, however small prospect of him being president again, is so horrible for them. What's the big deal? In the grand scheme of things, what's the big deal? What's the problem with him being president? The president of America doesn't have a lot of power anyway, at least normally. Usually, they don't have a lot of power. There's all sorts of checks and balances and stuff, and oversight from Congress and the Washington establishment and the CIA, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, or we played a couple of weeks ago. The intel agencies have 6 ways from Sunday to getting back at you if you diss them in any way. So there's obviously a lot of different nested power centers within American politics that have much, together certainly have much more control and power than the office of the president. So what's the big deal? Is it all about the image, just the look? That you don't want someone who looks like Trump? Because that's what I got from the entire 4 years. Anybody who actually complained about Trump over the 4 years that he was president that I saw on social media was complaining more or less, when it came down to it, that he didn't look right. He didn't look presidential. He didn't talk and act presidential. That was it. Nothing to do with policies really at all, because when you look at the actual policies, he didn't really do anything significant. He tried to do some things, and those things weren't actually negative. I mean, some people might have agreed with them, but they weren't some kind of like horrible...
he didn't usher in fascism.
No, anyway, even close to it. Or he didn't even, intimate that in any way whatsoever. So what is the big deal? It's just everything is opinions manufactured for people by someone, by the media, by the establishment, whatever.
I suppose those nested power centers would prefer not to spend 4 years directing their energy at having to hobble the president.
They'd rather run the country.
Yeah.
In the way they want.
run foreign policy,
right,
with a clear sight,
in particular
what's
foreign
going on
policy
outside, especially in Europe.
Right,
we've seen how active Biden administration has been in Europe.
Right,
from the get go. Nord Stream 2. I mean, the Nord Stream 2 cancellation goes back to Trump, but as well. But it ramped up big time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's call it American management of Europe.
Right.
And, I don't know if it's a natural segue, but one of the consequences of the NATO meeting this week is that the U.S. is increasing by 20,000 the number of U.S. troops stationed in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Some in the East, but not only. Germany and Spain as well. More troops.
So they're obviously... I was thinking about this recently, and I think I was talking to a few people about it as well.
Of course. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
One last thing. Of course, that is in direct opposition at the foreign policy level to Trump's wish.
Domestic.
Anyway, I don't know how successful he was. His wish to return to isolationism.
Right. Well,
that's such pejorative. You know what I mean, though.
Right.
Less of the
domestic
costly
policy.
expanding overseas, and let's just streamline at the very least. And
Right,
bring
deal
us
with the
people.
American economy, deal
Yeah.
with American infrastructure, deal with American social problems. But that's anathema to the people who really run the show behind the scenes, like the Washington establishment, as they're called. They're very much focused on global domination, as they have been for a long time.
Here's an interesting thought exercise. How might Russia-Ukraine war have gone if Trump was president these last 2 years? Might it not have happened? Might it have been different? Might Trump have used it to broker a deal, the art of the deal with Putin or something? I don't know.
Well,
Might it have gone differently?
2016, he would have had to have been very quickly on the ball, because by 2016 there was already a couple of years at least of the US, arming, training the Ukrainian military with their long-term view to, short-term view to launching a war, which they were planning to do in March this year, just after, or Russia invaded just before the plan that was hatched in 2014 after the coup, the US-backed coup in Kiev in Ukraine 2014, where they took control effectively of Ukraine, took control of its military and started training them for those following 7-8 years, with the view to basically attacking Russia, attacking Russian interests in Ukraine, and trying to take back the Donbass, trying to take back Crimea, and possibly then, harass Russia over its borders from Ukraine. That was the plan all along. And
So Trump no doesn't matter.
Well,
'Cause that's what the anti-Trump, anti-imperialist left says.
Yeah, I think that he probably would have tried to stop that happening, and he may have had some success in preventing it. And the Russians obviously would have been looking closely at what was happening and which way the wind was blowing, and so we'll never know. But I think that was probably one of the major things they didn't want him interfering with from 2016 until 2020. Were those plans, and they basically distracted him and harassed him.
He signed off on a major shipment of javelins at some point, 2017 or so, which escalated the arms deliveries, at least maybe from a covert to an overt official level. But I remember he was hemming and hawing about it because he wanted to deal with Kiev first, and then someone leaked it.
Right.
Oh, Trump's using foreign policy to dig up dirt. I think maybe that was what led to his impeachment. Was that the issue?
That was part of it, yeah.
Part of it.
Yeah, but 2014 was really a significant year because of that coup in Ukraine, and by the US, by CIA, US State Department, and what their intention was. I mean, they didn't just have that. They didn't just orchestrate that coup for fun, just for shits and giggles type thing. It obviously was part of a longer term plan to do what they have been doing and what they've got today, which is almost direct confrontation with Russia, and all of the knock-on effects that it's having on global energy prices.
De facto NATO beachhead,
right,
on Russia's doorstep.
Yeah, you could even go back to 9/11 and see this as a kind of culmination of what the point of 9/11 was, because we've talked before. I don't know if people remember this a long time ago, but back in 1999, the Project for the New American Century, PNAC, neoconservatives, basically Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Pearl, and a bunch of others in American kind of think tanks. There were a lot of them were former Trotskyists, former radical lefties who then became neocons, and that's why they call themselves neocons, because they were not conservatives or Republicans. They're new conservatives, and their plan in this document
to conserve the empire we've
was
had since World War II.
Their concern was that it was a failing empire, that they weren't doing enough. They didn't have boots on the ground. They didn't have a strong enough presence in the important global center, let's say, which was the Middle East and Afghanistan, with a view to containing and controlling that part of the world in order to contain and control Russia and China. and they saw that back in the 1990s, and 9/11, they needed in this PNAC document, I can't remember the actual name of it now, but anyway, it's a PNAC document that laid out this need for the US to project its power into the Middle East. Rebuilding America's defenses was part of the title.
And the term was forward operating bases.
Forward operating bases. They need to project American power into this strategic part of the world, but it was going to be difficult, they said, for that to happen, to get public support for it, unless they had a galvanizing event, and they said specifically like a new Pearl Harbor. But a year and a half later, they got that event, and off they went into the Middle East, and everything that has happened since then has led up to, including the coup in Ukraine was another add-on to it, has led to all of the chaos that's spreading, at least in terms of things that are directly related to the confrontation with Russia in Ukraine. They've led that I don't know if it was a plan, or obviously the details aren't known in advance, but certainly these people had a plan, and it's been followed. It's interesting, the neoconservatives, Wolfowitz, half of them are dead maybe. Is Cheney still alive? I don't know. Rumsfeld, still kicking around. Wolfowitz, he kicked the bucket yet? No. Pearl, I don't know. They're probably all in nursing homes or something, or should be. But anyway, it's interesting that those weird cabal of schizoidal type freak shows, who were in power under Bush, and they were in power previously, but they were just there for that period of time, making policy and implementing policy under Bush, probably under 2 years of Bush, or two administrations, under 8 years of Bush. But then through Obama, continues the whole, if you see it as a strategy and a plan, and there is a continuum from 9/11 and that plan from the PNAC document just before 9/11 to today. Today is a kind of like a culmination of a plan that was outlined by the neoconservatives in the late 90s. And it didn't matter who came along in American, which administration, which president there was there, or what administration there was. It didn't matter. It continued to today. The fulfillment of the prophecy of the reality creators.
And you all will be left to study what we do.
Yeah.
Judiciously as you do. That's such a creepy comment, that line.
So yeah, it's kind of weird to look at it in hindsight now and see it happening. And of course, it is kind of the end game, because there's there's a lot being said since Russia invaded Ukraine, but there's recently, I think, I don't know where he was talking. He was just talking, maybe it was a press conference or something. But Putin, as people in the UK keep, every time I hear somebody in the UK talking about it, they say Putin, like it's P-E-W, Putin. That Putin fella. It's Putin.
It's Putin, as the French say.
Putin. P-O-O-T-A. Putin. Anyway, this is from the Russian embassy in the UK, and it's just a little tweet, but it kind of sums up. Some states are not ready. This is what Putin has said. Some states are not ready to accept losing their supremacy on the international stage, and they are striving to preserve the unjust unipolar model under the guise of what they call a rules-based order and other questionable concepts. He's said similar things before in the past few months, but it's a good summation of what's going on and why we're in the situation that we're in today. The reason the world is in any chaos anyone sees in the world today, at least from a geopolitical perspective or a political perspective, is due to exactly what he says there. The US having lived, high on the hog basically at least since the Second World War, being the world's policeman, dictating to others what they should and shouldn't do, and having its way pretty much most of the time.
And becoming increasingly recklessly irresponsible.
Yeah, just
printing money, starting fires, starting wars.
There's no one to challenge them, right? And they're the global hegemon. But now things are changing, and they're not able to deal with it, so they're reacting in increasingly irrational ways to that. What is a natural change where one country cannot expect to be a global hegemon forever. At some point, other countries are going to improve, and you're going to have people who challenge other countries, that especially big countries, either with in terms of resources or population, are going to rise up and become peers. And are you willing to? Is the hegemon willing to share a place at the top table? If they're not, then there's going to be problems. There's going to be chaos for everybody,
Yeah.
So,
on the January 6th hearing, did you hear about this guy, Michael Stenger? Senate Security Chief at the time dies before hearing. He was due to give testimony that day. So he was the former Senate Sergeant at Arms who oversaw security during the quote-unquote insurrection. Oh, he died one day before he was to present new evidence. Don't know what that is, though. Well, looks like we got ourselves a coincidence. I wonder. He was. I don't think. It may just be coincidence. I think his family said he has had cancer for some time. Spent 35 years in the Secret Service before becoming Senate Sergeant at Arms in 2011. Oh, only appointed that post in 2018. I doubt he was about to spill anything serious. Because why else would they haul him up? I think.
Yeah.
They're not going to have a show trial and then have someone come and spoil it.
Spill the beans, yeah. Yeah. There's been a bunch of videos. I think they've come out before, but there's been a bunch of videos from inside the Capitol at that time, where there's very, very suspicious looking kind of activities among some people. Where there's one video, see if we can find it here. There's one video where there's people on camera who are being filmed from above, actually opening the doors. Now, you could say maybe they're open. I don't know, why would you open the doors if there's going to be a riot, or why would you open the doors, the main doors to the Capitol?
Yeah, they were electronically controlled doors.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And someone is on a CCTV camera. He motions up with a signal, and then points to the door.
Right.
A second person repeats from the inside, looks up at the camera, knows where the camera is, points at the door, and then it's electronically opened.
Yeah.
From somewhere else.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing where you'll never, you'll never know what the actual truth is or what actually happened. But I mean, you can put two and two together, and it came at the tail end of, like I was saying earlier, of 4 years of the Washington establishment effectively making stuff up to defame and demonize and smear Trump, accusing him of things that he didn't actually do. So why not, as a last hurrah, as he's going out the door, make part of his legacy that he was responsible for an insurrection in the country to overthrow democracy and destroy the seat of democracy in Washington D.C. That's perfect, Pretty smart when you think about it, to be able to do that. And of course, I think there's enough evidence at this point that has never been answered really, but there's enough evidence. We played a video a couple of weeks ago of the FBI, of an FBI deputy director or something being asked by, who was she asked by? I can't remember the senator. What was the senator? Was it Rick?
Ted Cruz.
Was it Ted Cruz? Ted Cruz asking her basically a series of questions about, well, the FBI involvement on that day. Was there anybody there? Did they have any informants there? Did they engage in any violent acts, etc., etc.? And she said, can't answer. And that's what the FBI does. I mean, the idea that the FBI would have infiltrated groups of Trump supporters long before that day, but have infiltrated them and then set themselves put themselves in position, or put their people in position on that day in order to create a certain outcome. i.e., make them look bad, make them do certain things, is the bread and butter of the FBI. That's more or less what. That's probably 90% of what the FBI does. It's called entrapment, and that's what they do. So why anybody would dismiss it out of hand, the idea that that's what actually happened on January 6th, 2021, last year, is crazy. You don't know anything about the FBI in that case. Even publish stuff in the New York Times or in the Washington Post or whatever over the years. So and yet, despite that, they have this show trial. Just trying to perpetuate what is now a myth, has to be a myth, that Trump orchestrated or organized
Insurrection.
an attempted coup in Washington, D.C. You have to understand, people, this is just so ludicrous. There's so many ludicrous things happening in the world now that are passed off as serious news that you're meant to seriously consider as maybe actually being the truth. It's just that, on the face of it, they're ridiculous. You know what I mean? And we have to sit here and talk about them as if this is something that any serious person would ever talk about as being as a serious topic.
It goes down in history. It goes down as history, and then the next thing comes on top of it, and it just ends up piling up.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many ludicrous things, Joe, before now where we were like, surely not, but it's official history.
It's just getting worse, though. That's the problem. It's getting worse.
Former Vice President, Mr. President, Joe Biden, again this week, gave a shout out to gas station owners to please bring down their prices. I sent you something. It's a tweet. It's a response. It's interesting. There's a lot to unpack here. So the person responding is Jeff Bezos. But read Biden's tweet first. My message to the companies running gas stations and setting prices at the pump is simple. This is a time of war and global peril. Bring down the price you are charging at the pump to reflect the cost you're paying for the product, and do it now. First of all, obviously that's nothing to do with me. I'm just the president, and capitalism and the evil corporations are making me do it, or rather, they're not playing ball. Maybe there's some truth to that, price gouging and all that. Jeff Bezos' response, he calls him out because he mentions the I word, inflation. This is Biden passing off any responsibility for rampant inflation in the US. Bezos' response, inflation is far too important a problem for the White House to keep making statements like this. He's just dismissing it right out of hand. Correctly, it's either straight ahead misdirection or a deep misunderstanding of basic market dynamics.
It's straight ahead misdirection, obviously. And that's what they've been engaging in over and over again. That's the whole point of the Biden administration, is to misdirect the public on every topic, on every issue. Yeah, well, the bottom line is, who's it? What's that kind of small, baldy-headed guy? Economist, famous economist. Can't remember his name right now. With glasses, from the 80s. Milton Friedman.
Yeah, Milton Friedman.
He's well, it's not his. I mean, obviously, it's something that is well known, or should be well known, is that inflation is directly related to the printing of money, how much money you print, and the only people who have the power to print money are in Washington D.C. and it's the government, basically. It's the Fed or the government. So if inflation is out of control, it's the government's fault. Bottom line, they're the ones who are printing the money.
Yeah.
So,
For anything else on U.S. politics, Gillane Maxwell got 20 years today, or yesterday. Still crickets about what she got 20 years for. The headlines say it's for sex trafficking, but that, implies, to who, where.
Any chance any of the purchasers will... no, it's all done and dusted, right? Just about her. Jeez, it's so corrupt, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah, it should be obvious, but there you go. Pride Month's over.
Oh, I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
Pride Month lives on in
No.
our hearts.
No. Pride Month's over.
Seared into my brain.
It's done.
It's done. Yeah. So
Well.
that's the end. We're not going to see any more rainbow flags and
No, you will.
No.
You'll see a lot more rainbow flags. But the outpouring of love and concern and consideration for the LGBTQWXYZ community
plus CIA.
plus CIA community will be toned down a little bit.
Okay. A little.
A little bit. It'll be toned down a little bit. It's just ramped up in June and Pride Month. Proud of what? I'm not sure what they're proud of. I don't know what the idea behind Pride is. Goes before a fall. Nah, that's just an old phrase that doesn't really mean anything anymore. I don't know. It's funny.
You know that Rachel Levine, Admiral, Sir Admiral Rachel Levine.
Man of the Year, yeah. Babylon B declared her Man of the Year.
I mean,
Declared him man, whatever.
yeah, I just need to say the name and people go, okay. Well, let's remind ourselves, this person, that's as diplomatic as I can be, this person is the deputy minister or secretary for health of the United States, right? The country, not like a smaller position. That's a big role in government. So this
She's
is
Assistant Secretary for Health.
okay. This is her.
Sure.
This week, I'm pretty sure it's this week. Just play it, and then maybe I'll have to decipher it. Maybe people already know what this she's talking about.
Gender-affirming care is life-saving, medically necessary, age-appropriate, and a critical tool for healthcare providers. As a pediatrician, when it comes to making sure kids are healthy and happy, I know how important care that affirmed someone's true identity can be.
Okay, so do you know what Z is talking about? Gender affirming care.
It's a euphemism for gender conversion, some version of gender conversion therapy.
The whole spectrum.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah, depending on
Like
on the case. Yeah.
Surgery.
Yeah, up to including surgery. Yeah.
Children.
Yeah, and go back to their.
That's the U.S. government official. Children.
It's life saving. Just wanted to check that. Yeah, she actually said it was life saving. Well, it depends what kind of life you mean, but
Yeah.
depends what you mean by what life is or what kind of life those certain people have after at a relatively young age, starting on the path towards that up to and including being having surgery on your body to remove perfectly good parts of your body and morph them into something that was never intended. And anyway, yeah, it's there's lots of problems with it. Go ahead.
Yes, it's.
Hmm?
I still can't believe this is actually a minister in the American government.
How did we get here? Yeah,
Right,
how did
it's-
we get to?
It'd be one thing if this was on the fringe of the left, because obviously that's going to come with Biden and the whole package. But Biden himself, depends when you're hearing him say it. But he has said, at least on the campaign trail as well, that the worst excesses of the left, don't worry about that. But here we are, and this is someone who's in the government, i.e., she's seeking funding to increase mutilations for children. Oh yeah, it's gender affirming care, whatever you call it.
We need to have a proper
30-40% of them regret it and or kill themselves
Yeah.
by adulthood.
Yeah, and have all sorts of medical problems when they undergo conversion surgery. I don't know. I mean, I could. we could take a stand, or I could take a stand and get worked up and angry about this, but you know,
I'm not
at
asking
this-
you to. I just
at this point, it's live and let live, you know.
right.
But the lines are drawn in that respect. Do you know what I mean? And there has to be boundaries, you know, for people who don't agree with that. You know, this isn't something that universally a universal moral good that everybody should accept, that everybody can agree on. Of course, it's not. It's an opinion of one section and a very, very small section of the population. In terms of transgender people, it's like 0.2% or something. Well, officially, I know you were saying earlier about stats showing that wherever they get these stats from, stats showing that it's now 25% of certain populations actually identify in some way as
Binary.
non-whatever. So I don't know, but still, even if it's 25%, you're talking about only 25%, and there's 75% of the population who don't feel like that and don't agree with what you're doing, you know. So, I mean, the only problem here is whether, you know, when the government gets behind it and starts mandating certain things. This is something that Jordan Peterson was kind of came on the scene about, the Bill C-19 in Canada, where the Canadian government was going to enforce speech, how you had to address someone, or it would be possibly a criminal offence if you didn't address someone the way they wanted to be addressed, which is bizarre, but that bill actually passed, and it's when the government starts mandating it and forcing by law on pain of some kind of punishment, the large section of the population, the majority of the population, who probably don't agree with certain aspects of it, then you've got a problem. You're pushing the country to, or any society, to a state of kind of civil war, or some kind of internal conflict within the country.
Does live and let live extend to letting liberal parents organize the mutilation of their children?
Yeah, if
Because we don't agree to that on other moral issues. Pedophilia, for example.
right,
Incest.
or even just child abuse.
There's just universal wrongs.
Child abuse, if social services come and take your children away from you for.
But when the social service is headed by someone who's
Right.
encouraging objectively child abuse.
Right. No, but I mean that's the thing. I mean, you're talking about the law there and government and stuff. I'm in a position where, you know, it's like, I have no appeal, or I do not appeal to government at all anymore to fix anything, because they're just making things worse all the time. So I've long since abandoned any hope that it's possible to appeal to government to do anything to fix any problems in society. I'm talking, when I say live and let live, I mean just at the level of ordinary people. And that's where it's going to go. You're going to go to a factional kind of makeup of society, where you'll have groups of people who are in opposition to each other based on these cultural beliefs or ideological beliefs, and the way they live their lives. Again, it's hard for me to know. It's hard for anybody to know to what extent this is actually a thing, and something that actually is or will in the near future impact the lives of the majority of ordinary people. Again, how many people agree with how many people are undergoing, it's a tiny percentage of the population, are undergoing any kind of gender reassignment therapy, or whatever phrase they use for it. It's very small.
So small still.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and assuming it stays that way, then it's just a sad, unfortunate aspect of the human condition, such as it is today. And there's many of those, and you just have to live with them, you know. But again, the problem is that if it gets to the point where government starts mandating it for people who don't agree with it, and threatens them with punishment, then you're just going to encourage a situation where people actually get out in the streets and really protest for something that is really important to them. You know what I mean? And that's when you'll see real protests, you know.
Yeah. Like we saw lockdowns and stuff.
Yeah.
What's past is prologue and all that stuff. I won't dwell on this too long, but there's a few updates about the Uvalde school shooting. I just sent Scotty. This is not news. You might have heard this Daily Mail headline: Mom who was cuffed by cops before she managed to jump the fence and save her son and his friends from Uvalde gunmen. claims she is now being harassed by officers who park outside her home and flicker their headlights. Like, why? Yeah, maybe she broke protocol, safety, and blah, blah, blah. But that's like creepy. You're going to keep going and harassing her? Super dodgy. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's another small one. Okay, let's just take. You probably haven't read this, so I'm catching you unawares just from your snapshot memory of what took place. Do you remember how the gunman got in?
Going through a door.
Came in through a door, and what was the description of why that door was open?
A teacher had opened it previously or something.
Mm-hmm. That is indeed what they stated unequivocally, Chief of Police, at the first press conferences. So here's an update on that. This is from NPR. The story about how the Uvalde gunman entered the school is shifting. Well, we noted that before. Texas officials have said a teacher propped open a door at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde just before the gunman entered. But they now acknowledge that the woman closed the door after the teacher's attorney spoke out. So she gives some pushback on that.
Yeah. Yeah, because she would be accused of being the one who actually opened the door literally to the entire massacre.
She might have culpability. She's like, I don't want nothing to do with me. Now, the story goes on to, this is actually from earlier in the month, in June, so it goes on to say that it wasn't her, but it was another teacher, unknown, unnamed. So the story changed a bit in the shifting version to, it was a different teacher, and a rock was involved. It explains there that the teacher had used a rock to leave the door propped open, which she removed a minute before, except, unbeknownst to her, she had accidentally broken the automatic locking system by doing that 1 minute before Ramos arrived to carry out his mass shootings. Okay, so that was the updated version in early June. So now there's been another update. Let's send it across. This is from last week, so this is indeed new news. NBC News reports that, in fact, that didn't happen either. Headline, multiple security failures contributed to school shooting. So if we scroll down, it explains that automatic locking doors and law enforcement radios, I'll mention that in a minute, automatic locking doors failed during the shooting. Specifically, 2 doors failed. The one at the back door, and no teachers mentioned here as leaving it open. And secondly, the doors in the classrooms failed. This school had been fitted with anti-mass shooting technology.
As many have.
And the teacher went to go and make sure she could lock it, and she was horrified to discover when the shooting started that the door was not lockable. I haven't been able to find out now, but I'm guessing there's some electronic tech involved here and that it can be overridden. And did Ramos do that when he was just having a fight with his granny and ran off and picked the school more or less at random? You know, how did that happen? Come on. Interesting. The other thing they mentioned is that there were 2. That's one issue, that the doors, automatic locking system for the doors wasn't working. The other one is that the police radios failed. The radio system was overwhelmed / they couldn't communicate with each other. Well, what a coincidence. The radios also failed at Parkland school shooting. To the point where they were like communicating with sign language. Parkland school shooting also resulted in 3 or 4 officers. One, I think, was taken to trial for failing to respond. Do you remember? That was the impression you were left with. Oh, the cops at the school were chicken shit.
Same as this one.
I knew as soon as they started saying that on day 2 of this, the cops at the school were chicken shit. And people then, you know, it's kind of a satisfactory fallback, you know.
Well, the start of that article called it an abject failure. That the police response was an abject failure. That's a convenient narrative, but it doesn't fit with...
coincidental, technological.
Well, it does, yeah, that, but it also doesn't fit with the way police respond to those situations. When they've been allowed to respond, they'll respond pretty well. They'll at least attempt to especially when it's children in school. Like, they're not going to hang about like they are accused of doing, or said they did, hang around outside for an hour and wait to see what happens. You know what I mean? While there's shooting going on, it's just ridiculous. You know. So yeah, I mean, I don't really care if people, you know, want to go there or not, or can or can't go there. The bottom line is that I know enough about the way America and the kind of deep state and the people behind, you know, the power behind the throne, let's say, in the US and in other countries works, and that it actually exists. There's over the years, over the decades, there's a wealth of information to show that there is that kind of a structure behind the scenes, that the overt government aren't very well informed of what actually goes on. They're not the ones who take the major decisions. And so that element behind the scenes does exist, has existed for a very long time, and their goal is, you know, their goals are multifaceted in terms of domestic and foreign policy, but they're pretty. There's not really any level that they won't stoop to in achieving their goals, and the mass shootings in the U.S. serve a very, very clear, very effective, or a very clear purpose in terms of social control and social division and distracting people from what's going on in up the hierarchy, you know. So for me, I mean, we've talked about, we've wrote about, or we've written about, and discussed on publicly, going back a long time, these kind of things that are called false flag operations, which got public recognition, official recognition, earlier this year, when the US, or when Russia was, you know, when the US media and government were reporting on Russia's invasion of Ukraine at the beginning, and they talked about false flag
on the
operations.
eve of it. It hadn't started yet.
Right, the day before, yeah.
And they let us know to be on the lookout for Russia shooting up children's schools,
right,
and blaming Ukraine in the West.
Right. So, I mean, that kind of thing happens in the world. It happens in the centers of power. Of course, anything bad that happens always happens outside of America, outside of Western countries. It's never Western governments who do this. It's always they who accuse other people of doing these kind of things, of false flag. But it gives official recognition to the existence of false flag operations, and specifically shooting up schools and blaming someone else for it, killing children, let's say, in schools and blaming someone else for it, as a policy tool.
Yeah.
So are we not allowed to apply that to America? Yeah. It's on what basis are we not allowed to apply that to America?
Right. What is it, guys? Is it a conspiracy theory that could or should result in the purveyor of said theories being locked up for mental instability, or is it actually a concept? They're flickering between the two, depending on the suitability of the context.
Well, as George Bush said not long after 9/11, he said, let us not entertain outrageous conspiracy theories, and he was referring specifically to 9/11 as a false flag operation. But jump forward 20 years and you have the Pentagon deputy spokesman recognizing it as a reality. Is it only true today and it wasn't true back then? I don't know. We'll see. Eventually, one day. What else is going on? Oh, yeah, well, this week, talking about Russia and Ukraine and stuff, G7 got together. What day was that? Monday?
Yeah.
Got together in Madrid on Monday. G7 being the usual suspects from the US, France, UK, Germany.
It's a top boy band, isn't it?
It's a boy band, G7.
Yeah, I saw the photo.
Bojo and of course the, what do you call her, von der bin Leyen.
She's backup vocals, I think.
So they all got together in Madrid to have a bit of fun and talk bullshit, basically, talk crap about, with no talk about things of no real significance in a certain sense, or talk in a way that led to absolutely nothing. It was just a photo op for them to make it appear like they actually have any influence or any desire to do anything of any significance or any benefit to anyone. But on the day that it happened, there was a, and it just so I don't know, coincidence, I suppose. Russia was accused of firing a missile at a shopping center, bombing effectively a shopping center, with 1,000 people inside, supposedly according to Kiev. On that day, and that event was used by the members of the G7 to great effect to condemn Russia and etc. etc. So it was quite coincidental, I suppose. But it turns out that it wasn't actually. They didn't actually bomb a shopping center. The shopping center caught on fire as a result of a bombing of a missile attack on what was effectively a military installation right next to the shopping center. So and of course there weren't 1,000 people inside. There was something, I don't know, the numbers they gave were like 10 people had died, but who knows? You can't believe a word that comes out of Kiev or of Zelensky's mouth, or really any of the Western powers' mouths these days. So bottom line is, yeah, it was not a missile strike on a shopping center. It was a missile strike on a large facility right next door, and that was a staging ground for, I think it was a storage area basically for weapons, Ukrainian storage area for weapons. So
in the city centre.
Yeah.
Which again speaks to the tactic of hiding troops and weapons.
Right, of course, yeah.
Among civilians. Of course, Russia hits it,
It
generates tons of CCTV footage of people fleeing.
Right.
You know.
And this was in Kremenchuk, which is quite far away from the front lines. It's kind of like western, central Ukraine. You can just throw that one up there, Scotty. This is a counter, I suppose, counter to the narrative that it was an actual shopping centre, or that it was a missile that struck the shopping centre. This is it beginning to catch fire. There's no sign of any missile strike or people running from the building, but rather people coming to look at it. There's also this is the aftermath of that fire that you just saw in that video. And there's no crater. And there's this one, which is like a satellite image of the red dot is a shopping center, and all those buildings to the right are the actual buildings where the missiles were fired. And in fact, see at the top of the picture under the word Kremenchuk there's a video going around of people diving into that pond. A couple of people running and kind of one of them jumping into the pond, whatever, just as an explosion occurs to their left, which would be in that building immediately to below the one of those two buildings immediately below the pond area, which is quite far. There were two missile strikes, probably another one to the building just north or just above the red dot of the shopping centre there. So those three main buildings were targeted, and as a result of debris or whatever, or maybe partially because of the explosion, the shopping centre caught on fire. But that was all turned into Russia missile strike on shopping centre with 1,000 people inside. It's just, I know it's boring, and you probably know this already, but it's hard in the moment. We've detailed a lot of the, and anybody who's been watching should know that it's almost 100% lies coming out of Kiev and the White House and Western powers about what's happening in Ukraine. They've repeatedly lied over and over again about pretty much everything on the reporting of it, but they keep doing it because in the moment there can be doubt. When you see a headline story or headlines across all the broadsheets that Russia hits bombs shopping center, 1,000 people inside, and that's all you read. You can wonder for a minute if that's what actually happened. So even though we know that they've repeatedly lied and they'll continue to lie as part of their propaganda, you still have to deal with each individual lie. Maybe not each one, but the major ones, because I suppose you never know, that there may be some truth to it on certain occasions, and you need to actually look at it. But so far, pretty much all of the major incidents that have been reported about the invasion of Ukraine have been, by the Western media, have been lies. To one extent or another, have been lies.
It's amazing how quickly as well they all fall out of the news. With the exception of Bucha,
Yeah.
I think a lot more work went into that.
That was because, I mean, there's a report, I was looking at it a couple of weeks ago.
The
I
others
think,
were kind of opportunistic.
It was Bucha was well planned, and it was in some mainstream media outlet, a story about it, and it was quoting, it was a story about the task force team that was put together from multiple countries in order to organize, multiple countries in the West to organize the shipment of weapons to Ukraine. Right at the very beginning, they put it all together, right? And there was a quote, they asked for comments, or they interviewed some of the people involved in this task force. I think it was an English guy, whatever, and he was saying, yeah, but Bucha, you know, it was a turning point. You know, we really got serious about the effort to supply Ukraine with any weapons it needed because of what we saw happening in Bucha. So it seems that Bucha was a defining moment in order to win hearts and minds in Western populations and amongst the people involved in the Western military operations against Russia and for Ukraine, to really convince them that they were fighting the good fight. But that's, I mean, when you consider the idea of the fog of war and the information war and, you know, mistruths and misdirection and lies as part of a war, as seen as a justifiable part of any kind of war, where do you draw the line? At what size of lies can be told? Yeah. Obviously, it's completely open. I mean, there's no restrictions. It's only what you can get away with. And that's seen as justifiable. I'm not saying that's not a conspiracy theory. That's, if you're involved in a war, and any wars that have happened in modern history, and probably ancient history as well, but certainly in modern history, there's never been any restrictions on the kind of misinformation and lies about the enemy, directed towards the domestic population and towards the enemy population. There's never been any restrictions on the amount of lies and the size of the lie that you can tell. The bigger, the better, as long as you can get away with it. Because you don't want to tell lies that are easily exposed as lies, because then you discredit yourself and you can't continue your information war. So as long as you can get away with it, as long as you organize it well enough and catapult the propaganda, as W like to say, then everything goes, basically. Everything is fair play. So you really have to take a broader view and stand back and look at the situation in that, or from that perspective, and assess each situation based on the awareness that is actually going to be happening all the time, and who has the most to gain from, who needs to lie the most. Because often in a war, one side will need to lie the most about their intentions, because both sides obviously want to present themselves as fighting a moral good fight, right? But sometimes, anyway, one side does not have the moral high ground, is in the moral low ground, let's say, and they're the ones who need to tell more lies, because the other ones with the moral high ground, the objective moral high ground, they can just let the facts speak for themselves. They don't have to do much spin. The ones who are on the other side need to spin a lot, need to tell a lot of lies. So you can get a good read on or as close as possible to a more objective assessment of who are the goodies and baddies in this war, by looking at who is telling the most lies, who is spinning the most. And you know, usually, even though the spin is there, you can look at details and get an idea. That sounds like bullshit. Sounds like that's war propaganda right there. Yeah, that side seems to be spreading most war propaganda. Why would they be doing that? They don't need to do it. They're doing it of their own initiative. Anyway.
Yeah. That's a much better explanation than, well, the lie ends up getting exposed. several weeks ago, I pointed out a Time magazine article which was noting that outside the West, Putin has popular support for this war in Ukraine.
People are not as exposed to Western English language media, or even just Western media.
They got themselves tied up in knots trying to explain this because they realized they had a contradiction. They probably shouldn't have brought it up because it reminded me, oh my God, of course, it's a glaring elephant in the room. They said, it looks like the standards of Russian information and influence operations has gone down since 2016, ... That's why they're being, quote, slaughtered in the information war here in Ukraine, which gave away the fact that there was no Russian high-tech, sophisticated, manipulating the whole Western mind,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
you know, getting inside the American voters. That was a lie. They exposed an earlier lie, trying to explain for why Russia is not able to counter all the one-way traffic in the Western media
Right.
on Ukraine.
Yeah. So the awesome power of the Russian propaganda machine that
Didn't exist.
led to Trump getting elected.
Was a phantasm. Yeah.
That
It was made by the awesome power of the propaganda machine in the West. So there really is in a sense, there are no two sides here. There is no Russian counter. There's RT and Sputnik, but they just nixed them from Europe. You know, you have to go search for it online. Maybe there's a sizable minority who actively do that, but for most people, it doesn't exist. There are no two sides. There's only one. You know. You said nothing of any significance really happened with the meetings. Well, Biden announces more troops to Europe after G7 gets together, so they all agree, okay, yeah, more troops. Then the NATO summit in Madrid, then they agreed to pick a fight with China.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the war with Russia is going great. Let's pick a fight with China to boot. Isn't it a telling? Kind of summarizes where we're at. We've got all these world leaders flying in to Bavaria and then on to Madrid and back to Japan and Washington and London, wherever. They're coming into Western Europe at a very time when air traffic is just seized up this week. For different reasons, all coming together. You've got worker strikes going on in France. You've got apparently a COVID outbreak in Ireland, seizing up its airport, cancelling flights left, right, and centre. You've got, they just said staff shortages in airports in the UK. People losing their baggage and missing flights, cancellations. And then these guys, happy as... Well, you saw how happy they were in the family photo in Bavaria. No ties, all palsy. They fly in, they fly out. They do something to... They do their governing. They, we did some government. We improved you lost conditions. But they didn't. I mean, they didn't do shit. In fact, Europe was like sclerotic this week. Anyone flying this week will have seen up close the chaos that's going on. And here are these guys and gals flying in and out of the same places. No problem. Private jets. Air Force. What was that conversation between Boris and Trudeau? There's so much shit from this week. Okay, so I think the gist of it was Boris says to Trudeau in front of the cameras, that's a nice jet you flew in on there, you know, big one, you know. And Trudeau's like, he's pretending, no, it's only a small thing, yeah. And they're both like
commercial airliners, yeah.
They're both pretending. No, my plane was more modest than yours, i.e., as a kind of sop to, you know, green agenda, climate change. No, I wouldn't be excessive, you know. And then having a laugh about it, just completely mocking people in their faces. They're not aware that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and then they had the people probably saw it, the chat at the G7 talking about Putin's pecs, show more pecs and all that kind of stuff.
Again, Boris leading the way.
Yeah, that was yeah. I mean, they're just not serious people, you know, and that's the best I can say about them is they're not serious people, you know, but they're taken seriously. It's a shit show basically.
Stuff's
Here, I'll just let people see it in case we'll put it on just in case they didn't somebody didn't see it. But this is the state of Western democracies, and when they get together to talk about really important topics.
Yes, hashtag rally is the best. See, they're all picked.
So when he talks about them, he's saying show them our pecs, show the public. You know, we know all the cameras on us. We're going to show the public our pecs. Ha 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 ha. Because that's what Putin did, and you know, Putin got some traction whenever he was, you know, bare chested up in out on holiday up in the Russian tundra, or Siberian tundra, a few years back, or whatever. And there's lots of memes made of it, and obviously they're just deriding, but they don't understand that.
they're deriding ordinary people.
Well, they're deriding ordinary people, and they're also they're also making fun of something that ordinary people, a lot of them anyway, didn't make fun of. And ordinary people don't share that opinion, where they're talking in a derisive manner about Putin's pecs. People actually saw him because he was on horseback. He was out on holiday, and there were other videos of him doing it, and people actually thought that was, wow, he's kind of like, you know, it's kind of cool that he's a real person. He goes on holiday and he's like in good shape or whatever, blah 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 blah. And this bunch of flabby windbags are sitting in Madrid,
drunks in Boris' case,
and drunk probably, talking smack about him, and they think that that's gaining them, they're getting some traction with the population by doing that. So it's so detached that they have no idea. That's how serious they were. You know what I mean? And that's their attitude towards the general situation. It's just it's a pissing contest. You know, they think it's a pissing contest between them and Putin.
Yeah, I don't think von der Leyen was picking up the undertones though. She pipes up, "Oh yes, horse riding is great."
Yeah,
she is actually a champion horse rider. Dressage competitions up the wazoo for Germany in the early 90s. She got one hell of an interesting past, that woman.
Yeah.
Her family tree, this is a quote from Foreign Policy, her family tree traces a legacy of power and brutality, incorporating not only some of Germany's most significant Nazis, but also some of Britain's largest slave traders and, through marriage, some of the United States' largest slave owners. She's House of Hanover.
She's got a good pedigree then. Nazis and slave owners.
She's got a
definitely got a good pedigree to deal with Ukraine. Nazis and slave owners. What were you going to say?
Got an ancestor from the house, the Electorate of Hanover. So her great something granddaddy was directly involved in subverting the British monarchy and putting a German in there back in like 1700s. It's ironic because, of course, she's the head of the EU and Brexit and Boris, and Britain's not in Europe, but the regime in Britain literally was put in there by a German monarch system, oligarchy back in the day. You know, she and he went to the same school as well at one point.
Her and
Boris, yeah. the first European school in Brussels.
Um,
She was born there, actually.
she's also, isn't she the one? Her and her husband are into vaccines, or her husband. Um,
Yeah, the German branch of it, BioNTech.
mm,
I think her husband is
yeah.
a shareholder in the sole proprietor of something that goes into the vac.
Oh my god.
So yeah, raking it in.
Wow. I mean, how much more evidence of corruption or of very likely corruption do you need? I don't know. Anyway, talking about Russia, yeah. So basically today, the Russia, in terms of what's going on in Ukraine, in terms of the what's it called, special military operation, it's going as planned, as we've said repeatedly from the very beginning on the show, from the very beginning of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine, that it was planned to take at least 1 year, and it was going to, follow a certain trajectory that they expected it to follow, and it seems to be doing that. It's got today the defense minister Shoigu in Russia said that the LPR, the Luhansk People's Republic, so one of the two People's Republics that broke away in 2014 after the US-backed coup installing a kind of neo-Nazi right-wing anti-Russian regime, when they broke away, but both of those more or less declared independence soon after, and were basically at war then with Ukraine for the last 8 years. So one of those two, Luhansk, and the northern one, it's actually, I think it's technically the bigger one, that's been pretty much fully taken by the Russians, and the one below that, Donbass, there's a bit more work to do there, but that'll follow suit pretty soon.
Donetsk.
Yeah, and that'll be basically the entire eastern area of Ukraine up against Russia will be under Russian control, including down south towards along the Black Sea. There'll be more work to do along the bottom of along the Black Sea, the bottom coast of Ukraine, over to Odessa. But at that point, and that's what we were talking about in previous shows, about that basically they may be able to at that point take a bit more land eastwards over to the Dnieper River, which runs sort of north-south, more or less in the middle of Ukraine, or not quite in the middle, but slightly right of middle. But the plan may be to take a little more land to the west, and also all along the bottom right over to Odessa. So there's still Odessa to take, and interestingly, the Danube, which is, I'm not sure it's the longest river in Europe, but it's a very long river. It starts up in the Bavarian, or where the G7 were, up in the Bavarian Alps, or in the German Alps. It sources there, and it flows all the way across in a kind of meandering path all the way out at just south of Odessa, basically, in Romania, but very close to Odessa. The Danube River, which is a big river for the whole for its whole course, and navigable, and a lot of trade goes through that river, up and down that river, connecting Eastern Europe to the Black Sea. So if that comes under Russian control, then it'll be a kind of there's an out there in a certain sense for if they ever took. I don't know if they're able to take it, but some Eastern European countries have a kind of like an alternative trade transport corridor out of Europe towards the east. You know what I mean? I think it's a fairly significant strategic waterway to be taken. You know.
I wonder if American weapons have been coming down there towards Ukraine. Did you see this morning that the Ukrainians hit Belgorod?
Yes.
With 2 missile strikes. I think that's a first. They've hit it with helicopters before now.
Yep.
Another shelling maybe hit nearby, but this is the longest distance. And I'm wondering if this is new weapons that arrived in Ukraine.
Is
that an escalation?
It's possible, and it's also I think I was just looking at there. It seems to be. It may have been a what do you call those? A cluster munition. But yes, so
hitting a residential area.
Yes, exactly. So
precisely what they accuse Russia of. They do.
Of course, yeah. And this is they're in a way they're trying to give Russia. This is a taste. It's not they're trying to give them, but this is a taste of what Russia would have faced, but on a much bigger scale, if they hadn't done what they did in February, in late February this year. Because, like I said, for the past 8 years, after the coup in 2014, the US-backed coup that overthrew the legitimate government of Yanukovych and installed a pro-Western, anti-Russian, neo-Nazi type regime in Kiev, the Western countries, particularly the US, began arming and training tens of thousands of Ukrainian military personnel with a view to effectively waging a war with Russia to take back the sections at the time of the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic and Crimea. So Russia's invasion, like we keep saying, was to prevent a wider war, basically, to prevent a bigger war, a war that, rather than wait for the war to come to them, they took the war to where they were very sure the war was going to come from. So this is now, they're, and the problem here with this is that there's been talk, the kind of missiles or weapons that the US and allies are delivering to Ukraine. We may see more of this, basically. Longer range weapons, longer range missile systems able to fire from well within Western held Ukraine into Russia. And if that continues to happen, if it gets worse, you can expect some serious pushback from Russia in the form of, not messing around and giving as good or better than it's getting, basically. And that would mean not attacking Ukraine. That would mean attacking potentially Western NATO military infrastructure outside of Ukraine in Western Europe.
Yeah. That reminds me of the tweet you sent me, Scotty, earlier this week, posted by Roscosmos official channel. As the NATO summit was kicking off, they posted these high-res pictures, probably anyone could have got them, of the venues for where the NATO summit was taking place in Madrid. And it was kind of cryptic, but they used a keyword they've used in another context before. They said these are photos of Western decision-making centers. Mm-hmm. They've used that context before with Kiev. We're threatening if Kiev kept firing into Russia, we would take out decision-making centers in Kiev. Right. But that was fighting talk, like. That is. Do you think that's on the card? I mean, I know.
You would love it to be. Neil.
Penny, World War III.
No, not penny. You would love it to be. You're not worried about World War III. You're just wanting to see some serious payback for these warmongers in Western nations. And yes, it's long overdue, but I don't know. I think the Russians, it would have to be pretty serious for the Russians to actually target individuals, high-level individuals, and obviously there's no point if you're going to do that, you may as well go for people like Bojo and his ilk and the rest of them in Europe. But I think Russia that would be a,
that's the last card.
If that was to happen, there would be different options taken or different actions taken, or different options considered before doing that, like basically military installations in Germany and Poland, for example. But that doesn't mean it's ruled out if it continues on, if it escalates, But I get the impression that Russia would, and it's consistent with the way Russia has done politics or done geopolitics over the course of the past 20 years, is that they wait, and then they basically lull their enemy into a false sense of security. They'll take a lot of flack, take a lot of hits, take a lot of abuse, basically. But when they respond, they go, up several notches from what you would expect, because they see the way the wind's blowing here. They see the arrogance and they see their intent, I mean, people look at the Russian invasion of Ukraine and it looks like this major, extreme, aggressive move to invade the country with so many troops and to try and take over the country. It seems crazy, but it's not. It's actually quite moderate when you understand what they were responding to, but it had to be done. They didn't do any half measures when they did it. When they decide to do something, there's no half measures. So Western leaders and Western politicians and Western military people should, I hope they would understand that if they get to the point where they provoke Russia to actually where Russia sees what they're doing and sees that they're taking steps. It's almost like, when two people fight or something, or people start to fight, and one person's aggressing another person, let's say, and say you're coming towards me, and I say, listen, and I'm Russia, right? I'll be Russia, and you be the West, right? So you're stepping forward.
Gee, thanks.
And sorry, Neil, somebody has to be it.
Come on.
And like you're like 5 steps away, and I say, look, 5 steps away, it's a bit too close. You're a bit aggressive. Don't come any closer. And you go, oh yeah, and you take 1 step further, and it says 4. I'm like, listen, really, it's not a good idea. Don't do it, And so it progresses that way. And I use the same tone all the time. And you expect that, well, what's going to happen whenever you get right up close to me? I'm just going to like chest bump you or something. No, it's like I take out a sledgehammer. As soon, you know what I mean? When I see that do you know what I mean? Once you get past a certain point, it's like, it's all in basically, because I know where it goes if I let you go any further, or whatever point is my red line. I know that you're crazy enough that only extreme measures will stop you. And it's rational, especially given the type of people that they're dealing with in the West. And I think that's the kind of scenario you'll be looking at. I don't know what the details are, obviously, but that's the kind of scenario you're looking at, where Russia would, take fairly extreme, to in a certain sense, to shock the person or the people back into reality.
Out
you
of
don't
complacency.
you don't just poke them a little bit,
Yeah. Because the complacency is all leading to...
Well, it's arrogance, right? And a sense of...
Complacency is leading us to an actual World War III scenario anyway.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's complacency.
you hope that you shock the other side into, oh, actually, no. We should take active measures to stop these steps that are leading to that place anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think, I just don't. I don't know about the word complacency. It's like you're not shocking them out of complacency. You're responding to what you see and know and are sure based on long observation that this person is approaching you or has intent towards you that is extremely prejudicial. They're approaching you with extreme prejudice. You know what their intent is. This isn't just some stupid person who's just kind of like going, Russia doesn't, we'll do whatever we want, whatever. They know, the Russians know that these people have destruction. They're on their mind. It's not, but they think they can just get there by on their own time, if you know what I mean, and no one will stop them, type thing.
Yeah.
That Russia would never take this action, and it's a good strategy to develop. Where you in the past you've always
taking it to the brink.
Talk softly. Well, Russia has always talked softly and appealed, and in a certain sense shown a kind of like what could be seen to be weakness or
discipline,
or a willingness to put up with a lot of shit. Because then you lull your enemy into a false sense of security that they can continue to harass you in that way and get to the point where they're in your house, basically, right inside your house, But then obviously when they go 1 step too far, you open up a can of whoop ass, and just end it, basically end the discussion, So yeah, I think that's most likely how it would transpire, rather than some kind of a wishy-washy.
It's not an MAD whoop ass. It's carefully done sort of.
Yeah, like we've said, on both sides, there's no nuke option. There is no nuke option, really. I mean, it's not going to happen. I mean, that MAD does assure that there will be no nuclear exchange. But and at this point, they're well versed in that. They know that. And they're all focused on, have been for many years, focused on the conventional options.
So you're talking about
military,
a conventional...
information, cyber, all of it.
Yeah.
Energy, politics, economics. That's what they've clearly, that's the arena in which they've clearly decided to operate. But it can be as devastating. If it goes too far, it can be as devastating as potentially as it can ultimately have the same end result as a nuclear exchange, where you have
The collapse of one side of the
yeah,
other.
where you have mass starvation, and but no, you wreck everything. You know what I mean? It's if you wreck the economy,
On wrecking the economy, a final piece from me. The kind of, in the Western sphere, the one outlier so far in all this talk about, oh God, we're banned Russian oil. Oh God, we have to save the planet. Sorry, folks, looks like there's going to be rolling blackouts this winter. France has been sort of mentioned as, well, they'll be okay. Will they, though? Headline in oilprice.com, France sees nuclear energy output plummet at the worst possible moment. So, obviously, France is well known for having like 3/4 of its electricity supplied by nuclear power. It's unique in Western Europe in that respect. It actually supplies power to Germany, which relies on France's grid. Alas, they've just discovered in the last couple of weeks that they're going to have to shut down half of the nuclear reactors because, oops, we weren't paying attention, and now suddenly we realize they're all suffering from corrosion, so we need to shut them down. It's just weird. Absolutely. Even the article itself notes that the timing is, just atrocious.
do we believe it though?
Well,
Or is that
that's what
someone
they're declaring.
Pulling certain strings.
Saying half of them won't be working like in the next year or something.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure they'll ever get back online because, well, because of the COVID pandemic, we've not got enough staff, expertise, etc., etc. So it's a very, very creepy addition to all the other hints of
Yeah, they're really
what else can you call it but economic sabotage that's going on.
prepping us for exactly, economic sabotage. One last thing just on Bojo, couldn't let him get away with this one because he's so woke. Bojo's so woke, talking about again about his favorite topic these days, Russia and Putin. He used the term toxic masculinity. Just play that.
Prime Minister?
Yeah, highly great to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, ist die Welt...
You need more women in positions of power. If Putin was a woman, which he obviously isn't, but if he were,
Yeah,
I
obviously.
really don't think he would have embarked on a crazy macho war of invasion and violence in the way that he has. If you want a perfect example of toxic masculinity, it's what he's doing in Ukraine.
Toxic masculinity. What a douchebag. I just put up that picture. This is a Russian response to him saying that that if he was a woman, Putin was a woman, he wouldn't. They put this up. He's dressed up as a babushka. This is up on right beside the British embassy in Moscow. And the Russian government or somebody obviously put that up. If Granny had balls, she would be Grandpa. That's basically what you're saying then, Boris. Thanks very much.
That is indeed, that's a still from a video. It is right next to the British Embassy.
Yeah, and so it's almost you could pick apart a lot in that kind of thing. Obviously Boris is dressed up as a woman there. So what? So just dress some guys up as a woman, and then they're all good.
Putin actually gave a formal statement as well.
Yeah.
In response, he said that British journalists may want to recall the events of recent history when Margaret Thatcher invaded the Falkland Islands.
Mm-hmm.
A completely imperial aggression with no justification in international law whatsoever. Pooyah.
Booyah. Yeah.
Things are kicking off in Uzbekistan just today, I think. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Headlines are all like blood on the streets, but it looks suspiciously like paint to me.
No, well,
Maybe it
I wouldn't
is
be
blood on the
surprised.
streets.
They're pretty.
There's red all over these streets.
They're pretty crazy over there. Yeah, that's a group. What are they called? There's a kind of an ethnic group in western Uzbekistan called the something
The autonomous region is called Karakalpakstan.
Pakistan, and those people, they're kind of like a separate group, and they had autonomy. They had a limited autonomy within Uzbekistan, and then the Uzbek government, which is fond of a bit of authoritarianism, has been for quite some time. They rescinded the freedoms they had, basically the autonomy they had, and then there were protests, and then they cracked down on it, basically, on the protests in a
By opening fire.
fairly brutal fashion, yeah.
Okay.
But it's not surprising for the Uzbek. Just you should read, check Craig Murray on Uzbekistan. He used to be the UK ambassador to Uzbekistan. You get a good idea of what's going on over there. But last thing I just wanted to mention was I know it's not a thing anymore, right? Or it is a thing. Is it COVID? Is COVID a thing still?
I knew we wouldn't get through a show without COVID.
COVID.
Good man,
the
Joe.
band's going to make it. The COVID band's going to make it. This is just a study. It's out of Qatar, actually, a fairly large study, and it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine just recently. And it basically concludes that, don't be fooled with the title. Well, the title's open, but the conclusion is that natural immunity is better than vaccination, than the immunity conferred by vaccination. As we know, immunity from these dodgy vaccines lasts just a few months, and then you're basically on your own. But it's even worse than that, because having primed your immune system to the spike protein, the specific spike protein that's in the vaccines, you kind of hobble your immune system effectively by priming it towards that strain of the coronavirus, and the current strain of the coronavirus has an easier time of infecting you, basically, because your immune system is primed with a vaccine to look elsewhere. And that's just one of the potential possible probable negative effects of the vaccination. So basically, there's a study that says natural immunity lasts longer, better than vaccinations. Of course, there's always the thing that they keep repeating and they never want to shut up about, which is that, but vaccines stop severe illness and death. Maybe, but in a very small percentage of the population who are in danger of severe illness and death, i.e. people usually elderly with multiple serious comorbidities, which is a very small percentage of the population. Ergo, there's absolutely no reason to force people, bodily autonomy, force people
My body, my choice.
to take a vaccine, which is what they did, on pain of no longer being a member of society. Take the vaccine. You may as well held a gun to many people's heads. That's the way they responded. People who otherwise would not have taken it took it under duress. And those are the people who did not need it, and in fact have had their immune systems potentially compromised by these experimental vaccine/gene therapy.
Now, I'm no scientist, but this is my surprise face.
Yeah, well, I was always going to go there.
So, is the seventh wave upon us? What are they seriously ramping up talk about more lockdowns or something?
Mask wearing, lockdowns, I don't know. They're not baggy enough. People are just desperate. They don't know what they're doing, and they're also desperate, which is a really bad combination. They're desperate to keep control, desperate to stay relevant, desperate to keep the narrative going, desperate to maintain their positions of power in a faltering, Western-dominated or American-dominated former global hegemony, and it's all going wrong for them. But at the same time, they're not serious about it, as we saw at the G7. They're all having a laugh because they're just
weird combination.
Yeah, they're serious problems with these people, and they're going to cause serious problems for everybody. And they're just going to go, meh, I don't know, didn't work. Maybe it's all your fault. Maybe you guys are the ones that are the problem. You're not doing it right.
Yeah, that's the message.
You're not
for
green
saving
enough.
The planet.
You cause the energy supply from driving your car. Stop driving your car. Buy an electric car. Invest in a windmill. Investment in a wind turbine and some solar panels, and then this wouldn't have happened. It's all your fault. We have to go now. Bye.
Bye.
See ya. Where'd you go?
Oh, that makes you angry? Okay, then fine. It's not your fault. It's Putin's fault.
Yeah, Putin
There,
did it.
deflected on him. His
What do you
fault.
mean? Well, you don't care about Putin? What about race wars? What about culture wars? Why don't you fight each other? We have to go now. See ya. Bye. You all have a good time fighting each other over some shit.
They fly off to... Where do they fly? Where are they going to find refuge? Because they can't outside the West. It's got to be within the West.
Yeah. Got lots of bunkers and stuff, don't they? Down the bunker.
Switzerland.
Switzerland. They're all going to take refuge in the eagle's nest. They've got an eagle's nest in the high Swiss Alps, from where they will observe the destruction of society and laugh and rub their hands together and say,
Maniacally.
"Mwah," or something like that. Who knows? Anyway, yeah, almost 2 hours. Let's go. We're gonna hit the road.
Let's
we
hit the road.
Gotta go and do stuff. We got way more important. No, we don't have way more important stuff to do than this, but we've got other important stuff to do. Which part of which is actually keeping up with what's going on, and so we can talk to you next week about
Wayne
more
Nelson
stuff.
in the comments says they're off to the South Pole. Yeah,
Yeah.
great idea.
The Hollow Earth, no? South Pole, and then straight down this hole in the middle into a big, like, massive underground city where there are, I don't know, dwarfs
Waiting for them.
waiting for them.
Waiting to serve them.
Carnivorous dwarfs waiting to eat them. Anyway, that's probably a very inappropriate thing to say. I'll probably infringe some kind of
Yeah, it's
cultural thing there by talking dwarfs.
What is it? It's height affected people.
No, not affected.
No, height limited.
No.
Shit. Stop. Let's go there.
Height differentiated
Yeah.
persons.
Height challenged people
Birthing persons. Height differentiated, not challenged. You can never present it as a
as a
problem.
No.
Height special. I don't know. Height special birthing persons. Whatever. Look, you're talking straight now. Let's go. Listen, yeah. So listen. Thanks for watching, listening, reading. Maybe you're reading, chatting. Don't forget to smash all the buttons, and thanks for commenting, because that's apparently a good idea to comment on our videos and stuff. We'll be back next week on our show. Hope you enjoyed this one.
See you
See you
then.
later.
Bye.
Can't stop the signal now.